Good morning, everyone. Good morning. The Lord be with you. Oh, come on, you're not God's frozen chosen. The Lord be with you. One more time for the Holy Ghost. The Lord be with you. Greetings. Grace, mercy, and peace is yours in the name of the triune God. It is my honor and privilege to come to you today. I thank each of you for coming. Ever since I started as a minister, I think from my very first Sunday, I'm always kind of shocked when people actually still come to church. Because sometimes you just never know, you know? And this particular Sunday where we're pulpit swapping, I want to give thanks to Wayne Serrata, Pastor Wayne Serrata. He's in Stewartville, right? That's where he pastors. He's the one who organized all of this, not the district superintendent, not just this one rabble-rouser. And he made it so much more fun than what I would have done. What I would have done is I just would have done, okay, Aaron's your pastor. Aaron and Luke, you swap. And then, just do evenly. Oh no, there are all the Methodist clergy and who opted for this are all swarming around the district right now this Sunday and having different levels of drive time. I think one pastor had they're just going to the next town over, and I was like, that's cheating. I drove over an hour to get here. Which is fine. It's fine. I'm going to share a lot in this time, even more than the previous congregation. I was at Dakota this morning. Whenever there's a 2-point charge, I always pray for that second point because I don't have the restriction of time. And all of a sudden you're like, oh, when's Aaron getting back? Okay. I'll tell you a little bit more about me, but I want to start with this one little story. I was recently having one of those random conversations, a single-serving friend, if you would say, somebody who I'm going to meet and probably never speak to again. And if I get these kind of conversations on a regular basis, and usually the conversations have a particular rhythm to them. In particular, like once someone asks, so what do you do? And I end up saying I'm a pastor. Now, I get usually one of, a couple of responses. Number one, probably what I get the most is reasons why that person isn't going to church. Like I tell them I'm a pastor, the first thing they say back, well, I used to go to church, but I get some story about something that happened. Or I get told, my parents are still going to church, and they've been going to the same church since, John Wesley, that sort of thing. Those are all fine, and I kind of enjoy those kinds of stories. It's part of the job that I appreciate. And when I was telling this one person this story, when I told him what I did, he leaned in and started asking me further questions. And I told him that usually I get some kind of faith story in response, or worse yet, I get a cold shoulder. I tell someone I'm a pastor, and I get, so what's going on this side? Miss, more coffee? Well, he leaned in and said, no worries. I get the same thing. What do you do? I'm a dentist. Brother. And while we shared that moment, we also shared the fact that the person who is missing at our table is an IRS agent. Because, you're sitting next to a pastor. You don't really want to talk about your church life. You're sitting next to a dentist. I swear I floss. And you tell the IRS, you're sitting next to the IRS agent, you're like, my W-2s are mine, you stay out of them. Now, that's usually the picture. When we say like Jesus is friend of sinners and prostitutes and tax collectors, when you think tax collector, you might think of an IRS agent you may have met if you've had that pleasure. I actually have a few IRS agent friends, and they are actually quite nice. Probably not when you're under investigation, but they're really good people. There's the uniform that goes with it. Suit, suitcase, tie, general investigatory demeanor. And that's a general impression of today's tax collector. And while the job is similar, when we hear that Jesus is a friend of tax collectors, there's a little bit missing from that interpretation. You see, you probably don't enjoy the taxes that are withheld from your check. You probably don't like having to pay quarterly or yearly statements. But the simple truth is that your money actually does go to your government. In the time of Jesus, a tax collector collected money and sent it to a foreign power, to some other government. You see, the Holy Land at this time is being ruled by the Roman Empire. Now, they didn't exactly have the best paperwork at this time, so they had to get what we would call a mole on the inside. Now, there's bigger hierarchy and whatnot, but a tax collector isn't somebody from some foreign land who's just trying to issue money. They wanted it to be effective. So a Roman guard that was stationed in your area would select someone from your community. Now, I don't know who any of you are, but, well, we'll just pick out that guy. Either one. You can decide between yourselves. And then their job as tax collector is to keep an eye on you all, to see how your crops are doing, to see what kind of clothes you wear. So when me, the chief tax collector, tells him, this is how much tax I need you to collect from your area, he can scope out who are going to be his targets. Me as chief tax collector, I don't care if he goes after, I don't care how he collects them, just as long as I get them. So he gets one of my Roman soldiers to go to your house and say, see, I heard you went on a cruise last year, so the large chunk of my tax collecting duties are coming out of your paycheck. Oh, you don't like that? Roman soldier. You know, that's how they collected it. How do you now feel about this guy sitting in your church? It might change how you dress around him. It might change how you put your kids around him. It might change if you see him making friends with somebody else, well, I shouldn't be friends with the person they're friends with. Because you don't want that tax collector having any knowledge of you or how you're doing. And then the tax collector, the chief tax collector, is the one who pays attention to all the tax collectors around. So as bad as that guy is, the head of the tax collectors really can get lost. Really on the outskirts. They better love their money because the people they grew up with are going to disown you. The friends, they're not welcome back at the high school reunion. They're not accepting your friend requests on Facebook. They're just kicking you to the curb. You're not welcome. That is actually where Zacchaeus lies, not the kind of a bad function of government. This is a stain on your community. He is a political traitor to your people. And at the time of Jesus, being a traitor to your people did more than just give you some unorthodox political views. It kicked you out of your actual community. They formalized it in kind of excommunicating you. You are not welcome at the family Christmas or Hanukkah. You're not welcome at the community luncheon and at the turkey dinners. You're not welcome at temple. You're not welcome at prayer service. Please stay away. You can't come and get clean from your sins. You are not welcome in our areas. Can you imagine what this does to a tax collector's personal view of self? I mean, separate them from their job as human beings when everyone you know suddenly doesn't want to know you anymore, refuses you any kind of friendship or kindness. Eventually, the outward expressions of people judging you can turn inward. And you get the kind of person that you may know who's so filled with self-hatred that it spews out with every communication they have with another human being. This is the kind of person that as he's counting his money, Zacchaeus hears that there's a Messiah coming to town. he hears that there's this Jesus, and he wants to get a look at him. He runs out to see him, and the crowds are so thick he can't get through because he's a short guy. And I don't know if you all grew up with Sunday school, the song, A Wee Man. Was the kid? Okay, a few head nods. I didn't grow up in Vacation Bible School, so I didn't sing it, but some people did. Y'all know that tune. Now, Zacchaeus climbs a sycamore tree to get a look at Jesus. Now, I've got 2 kids. I've got my 4-year-old, who's going to be 5 in October, named Calvin. I got my 2-year-old, Josiah, and I got another one coming in February. Thank you. No idea what it's going to be other than a Nelson. That's all. As long as it's human, we're good. But the moment Calvin was born, I suddenly got into dad jokes. I don't know what it was. It just happened. So Zacchaeus climbs a sycamore tree to get a good look at Jesus. He literally went out on a limb for Jesus. So working on that one all week. Okay. So he climbs a sycamore tree to get a look at Jesus. Here comes Jesus, and he spots him. Jesus walks by, sees him in the tree, and names him Zacchaeus. Why? How does Jesus of Nazareth, a couple of days' journey away from Jericho, it's far enough away from Jericho. How can he spot a guy in a tree and know exactly who he is? Because he's a celebrity, and not the good kind of celebrity. He's the evil kind of celebrity. Everybody back up. Jesus sees him in the tree, names him, Zacchaeus, come down. And what does he say? I want to have dinner at your house. See, I couldn't do this at the last church, but I'm going to pick somebody and I'm going to have lunch over at your house. I'd have the same feeling, all right, if somebody said to me, I'm coming over to your house for lunch. I'm going to be there in 10 minutes. Give me 20. I got to clean up some stuff. Why? Because God forbid anybody see that you actually live in your own home. I mean, we all have that kind of feeling like, the dishes are like up to here. Like, we all have our dishes up to here, right? But Jesus says, I want to have dinner at your house. There's one thing that makes it a little uncomfortable. What makes it further uncomfortable is everything I told you about the role of a tax collector. This is just a personal check for some of us who, like, I follow Jesus and I'm a disciple. Can you imagine Jesus saying to someone like that he's going to their house for dinner? Hold on. For an Orthodox Jew, which Jesus was, the definition of friendship is to break bread with someone, to have a meal with them, to welcome them to your miniature sanctuary, or in Hebrew, your mikdash mayat, and have one of the most sacred experiences that all life affords, friendship. That is what it means. You share, whether it's a bagel, a food, probably not a hot dog in Jewish culture, unless it's kosher. Hebrew Nationals are amazing hot dogs. Quarter pounders, delicious. Anyway, I'm still in love with summer. I haven't gotten enough hot dogs. Jesus says to this guy, come down. I want to come to your house for dinner. He's not just hungry and looking for a quick meal. He's saying to this evildoer, by anybody's standards, not just like a guy who swears from time to time. This is a person who misses church. This is somebody who actively is a plague on the community. And Jesus says to that man, I want to be your friend. I can't help but think that Jesus' followers might have gone, hey, that's a little far for me, man. I don't mean to say you're wrong, Jesus, but do you know that the meatloaf he's going to serve to you was stolen out of that woman's kitchen? The hospitality he's going to offer Jesus is blood money. That is how it's nourished and supported. Can you blame a follower of Jesus who might be a little queasy about the grace of God right now? Him? You're going to save him? You're going to be friends with him? That's the duality of the Christian faith. That is one of the stark, radical concepts that every preacher should proclaim. One, no matter who you are, no matter where you're from, no matter the skeletons in your closet, no matter the moments of shame, degraded love, no matter what darkens your past, God would rather die than live without you. Each one of you. No matter how far you've fallen, no matter where you have, how far from his love that you might experience, there is nowhere that God wouldn't go for you. All of you, each of you. Not the person sitting next to you, not like a Billy Graham or a Mother Teresa or like some vague sense of the world. You, if you were the only sinner on the planet, Jesus would have died just for you. And that is the very beginning to lay hold of the Christian faith. Without that direct trust in that statement, it makes the next part impossible. Impossible. Once you trust that God would save you, the next step is that God would save everyone else too. I was baptized as a baby in Mora United Methodist Church. My ancestry goes way back to the founding of the county of Kanabec County and to the town of Mora. Despite that moment, what you know about me right now is that I'm a pastor and I was baptized in Mora. So there's probably a few assumptions, and most of those are probably wrong. About the in-between of my life. My parents were not particularly religious. I got baptized in that church because the pastor at the time showed up at my dad's house unannounced and said, "Can I come in for coffee?" Yeah. My dad knew him because family members of ours went to that church. And there I am, a baby on the floor, and the pastor sipping coffee goes, "So, when am I going to see him in Sunday school?" Kind of heavy. Like, not exactly a tactic I use when I'm talking to people who haven't been to church. But on my dad, it worked. So in the very beginning, I did go to Sunday school. Was during the sermon at one point, and then the pastor switched, and then that pastor didn't want the Sunday school during the sermon, and I napped with my mom. That was my general experience. It wasn't my fault. They had Mora United Methodist Church has these gorgeous blue stained glass windows that line the sanctuary. Gorgeous blue. And they want to display them during the sermon, so they turn the lights down low. So all the natural light in the place, it fills with natural light, but it's all soft blue. And I tend to shout from time to time in my preaching. The pastor that I grew up with did not. He was a very soft-spoken gentleman, which aided in, I thought we should change the name of the church to St. Matrice, St. Mattress. Love the guy, love the church, right? But my parents, my dad would fight for the back, for one of the back remaining pews, getting too close to the front. It's too holy up here. I gotta sit in the further back. Because he wanted to be the first out. My dad didn't really have time for the fellowship of the church, and he didn't have time for leadership in it. He started his own business and just really wasn't into it. My mom was busy wrangling us, so we really never connected with the church life. We moved when I was in 7th grade. Y'all remember the year? Oh, gosh, I can never remember the year, but I remember the event. There was a day that the governor, Rudy Perpich, closed all the schools in the entire state because it was just too cold. It was in the mid-'90s. That was supposed to be my last day in Mora Public Schools. Got canceled because it was too cold. I moved during the Christmas break between the first and second semester of my 7th grade year. And 7th grade was just such a slog for me because I didn't have any friends. All my friends were back in Mora. I wasn't good at sports. I wasn't really into theater or art. I wasn't very good at just about anything. And when I got plugged into this mega school of Lakeville High, before it was Lakeville North and South, it was just Lakeville, I was just a number. I really didn't have an identity. My dad and mom were, they're okay Methodists, and so they plugged me into the confirmation program of the First Methodist Church that had service at 11 o'clock. My dad only would go to a church that had service at 11 o'clock because to go to church before that is unseemly. My dad has lots of really great statements like that. My dad never made us go to Christmas or Easter. We would never go to Christmas or Easter church. Why? Because that's for heathens. Why should I fight some stranger for my pew? You could say, me becoming a pastor, my dad and I have had a few conversations. So I move in 7th grade, I go into the confirmation program, and I can quote my dad, "When you get confirmed, then you can stop coming to church. This is your way out." At least he was being honest. I get confirmed, and I go through a couple of experiences that just were kind of rotten. I never went back to that church, despite the fact that they still send me the newsletter. And a kid without an identity, and I went through a few things, my brother's childhood friend died. I still struggled to make friends. The one thing I did to make friends was I joined the chess team because I'm cool like that. And one of the guys on the chess team heard my story, and he was driving me, so mom didn't have to pick me up, and he invited me to a youth group. And in the basement of his pastor's house, I got ambushed by Jesus. Jesus became so real to me that it was like I was sitting next to him. The love of God seemed so permeable that I could have touched him. And it absolutely changed my life. It wasn't a Methodist church. It was a non-denominational Pentecostal church that really then infused in me a sense of calling and need. A need to follow Jesus. I spent a month living in Thailand doing a missions trip. I was at an orphanage for boys. And it was there that I discovered that I felt the call to be a pastor. Now this church, as I said, gave me an identity. I'm now my nickname used to be Charlie Church. I would rush home so I could so I could get on TV and hear the sermon from some pastors that I liked, and I would take notes. I went to the adult Bible study, the fact that it didn't matter I was in high school, youth group. I went to these marriage courses, even though I'm 18. And I can't keep a girlfriend to save my life. Maybe I'll meet someone. And I go to, so college search happens, and I decide on Hamlin University. It's a good Methodist school. I picked Hamlin because they were the first to say yes to me. Real difficult gradation there. In my first year of college, it still, I think, is one of the hardest years of my life. Because that Pentecostal church, I don't mean to begrudge it any. I'm not trying to give it a bad name or anything. But if they used the language of sacraments, they don't. But if they did, they would say baptism, communion, and attendance. You attending was a sign of your faith. Now, Hamlin was far enough away, and when I didn't have a car, I couldn't make every Sunday. I couldn't make the adult Bible study. I couldn't make the youth group every week. Sometimes I didn't even make the marriage counseling courses. And it built up over a couple of weeks and months, this sense that I was falling away. That somehow my faith was less than. I was taking Bible classes, and so my questions were getting a little bit more intense about what they thought about the Bible. And the pastor, who's at this point just a dear friend and mentor, he was starting to get frustrated with me. And I remember there was a moment in prayer group, we're all standing around praying, and one of the pastors of the church looks me square in the eye and says, "You need to stop sowing division." and leading people astray. And all I thought I was doing was asking questions. It all comes to a head with Hurricane Katrina when Facebook was brand new. And the feed, this was the first things that were ever showing up on your news feed were images of what was happening at the Superdome. And I show up to church on Sunday just feeling awful about it and praying about it. And a church they were connected with ends up talking about, they had called in and they were saying that they were able to hand out food and ministry and they were doing these great things. And good on them. He hangs up the phone and the pastor looks out in the congregation and says, you see, those who give to God, God takes care of. And I just started hearing about the word prosperity gospel in this kind of sense that, like, if I financially give, well, then God gives back. And so all I could think is that this pastor is trying to tell me that because the people in the Superdome weren't giving money to their church, God somehow didn't protect them when the storm came. That was in essence what he was saying. And in that theological moment of break, I got up and I left. What followed, I did not respond well to this. I'm not going to go into depths of the shame and darkness of what I went to. But it was a true crisis of faith. I almost converted to another religion. They wouldn't have me. They actually told me to go back and go be a Christian. I got sucked into some dark and stormy stuff. But that guy who took me to the youth group that first time, his name is Josh. And despite being told that I was a bad influence, despite being told that I would lead him astray, Josh would still call me Saturday mornings. He would come from Lakeville to come pick me up and take me to Perkins. Didn't care how he smelled, what I had done. He'd just tell me it's going to be okay, man. You'll come around. Eventually, you'll come around. It's okay. He'd hear whatever I'd have to tell him, and he'd just, it's okay, man. Now, I slowly came back to faith, mostly through studying Scripture. I fell in love with the Bible, and particularly the Old Testament. And for any Christian who says that the Old Testament isn't worth reading, you're full-heartedly wrong. I don't hesitate to say that. The Old Testament carries with it as the very breath and life of God that is made enfleshed in Jesus. And knowing its history and its past is deeply enriching. I loved the Bible, but it was God's people that I was having an issue with. I was starting to think it might be time, I don't know, I might become a Bible professor because I know my stuff. Why not? And I can still remember word had gotten that I had almost that I was looking at another religion, and I was getting some real nasty messages from friends, quote unquote friends. Josh calls me and says, I need to speak with you. Super serious for this guy. And then Josh, we meet at a park. I've got my bag of McDonald's and I show up and there he is. And he sees me. And Josh, well, we're kind of close to Wisconsin, so I don't know how many of you are Packer fans. There's going to be a few of you. But and the thing about Packer fans is you're actually fans. But he is a Viking super fan. Like, kind of annoying to sit next to, actually. Like, you want to actually see the game with the guy, but you can only handle about 15 minutes. Usually the first point they score, you realize what you're in for, because he starts to, I'm being amplified, so I'm not going to do it, but imagine the sound coming out of my mouth. He sees me. Luke! And charges me. Picks me up. At this point, I'm 280 pounds. Picks me up and gives me the wettest kiss on the cheek that I've ever gotten from another man. Josh, I don't agree with him on almost anything other than Jesus. The stuff he puts on Facebook is just ridiculous. We don't agree. And I mean, I'm talking important things, like how to raise your kids. Like polar opposites. What's important for a community or a town? Like just I don't agree on any of that. But Josh Forsman is the face of Jesus to me when I need it, when I'm that Zacchaeus, when I am at the bottom of things. That is exactly what a Zacchaeus needs, to be seen. Not for what you do, not for what you've done, but for who God sees you to be. To pierce through the layers of shame and guilt or societal pressure or what other people are saying about you and sees you for you, the one that God created, the one that God had in mind from the beginning. And maybe for you, you're not a Zacchaeus. Maybe you're even thinking, man, Pastor, you got to give those disciples a lighter time. I didn't have, I don't know how many times I went to camp, or I've been at certain events and people share their faith stories, and sometimes their faith story is, I've been addicted to drugs, I punched my dad, and then I got Jesus, and it all turned out. So there's a lot of people who grew up just, I don't want to say normal, but in generally welcoming lives. They had good parents and a good education, and faith was just kind of a part of their day. And so these kind of life-transforming stories seem a bit more dramatic for them than anything else. To them, I would say this. In the story of Zacchaeus, what happens after Jesus says, come down, I want to have dinner at your house? He scurries down the tree, grabs, okay, gets them to the place, and becomes a bumbling fool in the face of Jesus' invitation. The way it's written, I'll pay back fourfold everybody I've defrauded. And see, I'm going to give half of everything I own to the poor. Because when you're in the face of real love, grace, and forgiveness, it can make honest, hard, scary men turn into puddles of emotion, and they don't know what to do. Now, the saying is, the way it's written, the way it's traditionally understood, see, I will pay back 4 times what I've stole. See, I will. Now, in the Greek, the tense of the word will is ambiguous. It gets translated I will, future tense, like it's something I'm going to do. Now, I can already see some people are like, you're getting caught in tenses. I'm like, I usually don't get caught in a tense unless I'm camping. Another dad joke for you. 2 for 1. So the reason why it's important, I will, because if you can translate it, I have paid back 4 times what I've stolen. I am giving half of what I own to the poor. When you translate it like that, which you can, if you translate it like that, you know what that is? Jesus. I'm doing my best. I'm doing my absolute best. They don't get it. No one seems to get it that I'm doing my best with what I got. But I know the family doesn't like me anymore, but somebody had to take away Dad's keys. I know I'm letting the team down, but I'm really sick and I can't play anymore. If he keeps drinking, I just can't stay. Do you see me, Jesus? If it's translated like that, if it's translated, I am doing this. You see Zacchaeus being a man who's absolutely trying to fight back everything that is evil in his life, and he's losing. Have you ever been in that position where you're doing everything in your power to do what is right, but it still is turning out wrong? Nothing you're working is actually moving the ball at all in the right direction. You're giving it everything you got, and you're coming up short. And all you want is, Jesus, what is your response? Do you see me? Jesus' response to Zacchaeus in this instance, today, salvation has come to this house. For he too is a son of Abraham. He too is a son of Abraham. That is a saying he has not heard in years. The crowds would have said, he's a Roman. He's a Gentile for what he's done. Jesus sees Zacchaeus for what he is, the one that God can't live without. Do you see that about yourself? Can you imagine Jesus coming to you this very day and saying to you, I know your whole life story. I know every moment of sin and shame that has darkened your past. I know every skeleton in your closet. I dare you to trust that I love you just as you are and not as you should be, because you're never going to be as you should be. The hardest thing to do is respond, yes, Jesus. I believe in your love, and I want to shape my life in a response to it. But frankly, there's so many of us who are like the disciples who are following him in this story, who say, heard a lot of good sermons about it. Maybe I preached one or two myself. But I always thought it was some kind of kindly lie that pious people tell each other to pat each other on the back. So I'm going to get through the drudgery of the day. And that is what comes across as the love of God in so many places across not just our state, but our world. If your perception of how God sees you is anything but grace, loving, care, and forgiving, if it's anything shy of that, you have a God of your own making. And in biblical language, that's idolatry. The work of every Christian is to call out the idolatry of our brothers and sisters and to replace it with the God that is revealed by and in Jesus Christ, who is as real today as he was 2,000 years ago, whose love can be felt by those who know deep in their bones that there is nothing that will separate them from the love of Christ, not today or any day. That can change, that will change everything. It gives you the power to see the Zacchaeuses in your life and to see them the way God sees you. And when you do that, you fulfill the prayer that the Lord Jesus taught us. Your kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. We don't have to wait for heaven to see heaven here right now. The way we do that is by seeing one another the way God sees us. May you be faithful in this endeavor. Amen. Okay.